Oksana's funeral. 3 days had passed since the terrible night when Oksana left this world. According to old customs, her body was placed in a wooden coffin, wrapped in black ribbons and adorned with pale, withered flowers. In her cold hands, folded on her chest, burned a thin wax candle, its flame barely flickering in the hot summer air. Another candle stood by her head, casting long, flickering shadows on her frozen face. The cart that carried the coffin was drawn by two black horses, tall, strong, with shining sides. They impatiently struck their hooves on the ground, as if sensing something ominous. The old driver struggled to keep them under control, whispering prayers, but the horses snorted, their eyes wide, and they pulled ahead. Behind the cart, with heads lowered, the long funeral procession followed. Ahead, the priest in a black cassock slowly walked with a cross in his hands, his voice reading prayers blending with the mournful singing of the church choir. Women covered their heads with black shawls, barely holding back tears, while men silently walked beside them, grimly looking down at the ground. The day was unusually clear. The sun blazed mercilessly, as if it wanted to dry up the last tears that ran down people's cheeks. The sky was clear and perfectly blue. Not a single cloud, no breath of wind. Yet this beauty felt unnatural, foreign. It was as if nature itself held its breath before something dreadful. People, as the procession passed, stopped, folding their hands in prayer. But as soon as they looked at the face of the deceased, a cold terror gripped them. Oksana no longer resembled herself. Her youthful, beautiful appearance had disappeared. Only dull, ashen skin remained, hollow eye sockets, and her lips had darkened, as though her very soul was leaking out through them. The sight of her frozen, twisted face caused genuine fear. Even those who knew her well could not look for more than a few seconds. Something invisible made them turn away, as if the deceased's eyes might see them in return. Children hid behind their mothers. The elderly crossed themselves and whispered prayers, and the men clenched their fists, trying to push away the thought that tore at their hearts. This death was not ordinary. Suddenly, the horses bolted, unexpectedly and sharply, as if someone had pushed them. The cart jolted, women screamed, and the candle by the coffin trembled and went out. A cold wind swept through the crowd, and though the sun shone just as brightly, they all felt it. The eerie, inexplicable breath of something invisible. Somewhere far away, the cry of a raven echoed. People crossed themselves again. Something was wrong. Oksana's disappearance. The procession had almost reached the church when suddenly everything around them changed. Just a moment ago, the sky was clear and bright. The sun was blazing, warming the earth. But now everything vanished into an ominous darkness. A thick, heavy cloud, black as smoke from a fire, covered the sky in just a few seconds, cutting off the light like a sharp breath of a storm before a thunderclap. The first gust of wind seemed like a warning. Cold, strong, unexpected. It swept through the people, making them shudder. Some could only wrap their arms around themselves, feeling the chill seep to their bones. Then the wind howled. Not just howled. It spoke. It seemed as though hundreds of voices echoed within it, prolonged, barely audible, like whispers coming from everywhere. They intertwined, merging into one sinister hum that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. The candle by the coffin trembled, Its flame jerked and went out, and then the real horror began. A whirlwind burst forth suddenly, as if it had been released from a hidden place where it had slept for centuries. It swirled among the people, tearing flowers from their hands, ripping black shawls from women's heads, scattering the wreaths that lay on the coffin, and then its force latched onto the coffin itself. With a terrifying screech, the coffin lifted into the air. People screamed. Women stepped back. Some fell to their knees, urgently crossing themselves. All eyes were glued to the coffin, which spun in the air, tipping from side to side, as though invisible hands were playing with it like a toy. The priest tried to raise the cross and shouted a prayer, but the wind ripped the words from his lips, carrying them into the void. The coffin rose higher, tossing in the air again and again, until it crashed to the ground with a deafening thud, and then everything stopped, just as suddenly as it had begun. The darkness disappeared. The sun shone brightly in the sky again. The wind vanished as if it had never been. The birds, which had frozen in silence, resumed singing, and the leaves on the trees slowly swayed, as they should on a calm summer day. People looked at each other, confused. Some were still trembling from fear, while others tried to gather the scattered things. Someone crossed themselves, and someone whispered, "Lord, have mercy on us." And then they all noticed her. The candle by the coffin's head was burning again. No one had lit it, but it burned steadily, calmly, as if it had never gone out. It was terrifying, but even more terrifying was what they saw when they opened the coffin. It was empty. Oksana was not there. The scream of the woman closest to the coffin pierced the air. People rushed backward. Some crossed themselves. Some looked around, as though expecting to see the girl nearby on the grass, but she was nowhere to be found. They checked everything, every bush, every stone, every shadow. They searched the tall grass behind the trees, along the roadside. People spread out across the field, calling her name. Though everyone understood, there was no one to answer. She had disappeared, and no one could explain how. She was dead, but where was her body? The sun began to dip toward the horizon. The shadows grew longer, as if the light itself was retreating, unwilling to bear witness to this horror.